When Mystery Inc. rolls into Hawkins, Indiana to investigate reports of mysterious disappearances and government conspiracies, they expect another case of criminals in masks. Instead, they encounter the terrifying reality of the Upside Down and its monstrous inhabitants. Teaming up with a group of local kids who have fought these creatures before, Velma, Fred, Daphne, Shaggy, and Scooby-Doo must adapt to a world where monsters are real, dimensions collide, and running away might not be enough. As they face the Demogorgon and uncover Hawkins' lab's dark secrets, Mystery Inc. learns that some mysteries are far more dangerous and real than anything they've ever encountered. The Mystery Machine's engine hummed as it crossed the town limits of Hawkins, Indiana. Inside, the gang was reviewing their latest case file. "So let me get this straight," Fred said, steering carefully down Main Street. "Multiple disappearances, strange lights in the sky, reports of wild animal attacks, and a suspicious government laboratory that nobody's allowed near." "Exactly," Velma confirmed, pushing her glasses up. "Plus, the electromagnetic readings in this area are off the charts. Something very unusual is happening here. Like, I vote we turn around and investigate a nice, safe, haunted pizza parlor instead," Shaggy suggested from the back seat, arm wrapped around Scooby-Doo. "Rhea Rizza," Scooby agreed enthusiastically. Daphne laughed. "Come on, you two. When have we ever been in real danger?" "Last week," Scooby protested. "That was just Old Man Jenkins in a phosphorescent suit," Velma reminded him. As they pulled up to the Hawkins Community Center where they'd arranged to meet the local sheriff, they noticed something odd. Instead of police cars, there were several bicycles parked outside, and a group of teenagers seemed to be waiting for them. The gang climbed out of the van. The kids approached immediately, a curly-haired boy with a baseball cap leading the group. "You're Mystery Inc., right?" he asked. "That's us," Fred replied, extending his hand. "And you are?" "I'm Dustin Henderson. This is Mike Wheeler, Lucas Sinclair, Will Byers, and Max Mayfield." He gestured to each teen in turn. "We heard you were coming to investigate Hawkins. No offense, kids," Daphne said kindly, "but we were supposed to meet with Sheriff Powell." "He's not going to tell you anything," Mike said flatly. "The real story of Hawkins? We're the only ones who can tell you that." Velma's interest was immediately piqued. "And why would that be?" Max crossed her arms. "Because we've been living it. The disappearances, the monsters, the cover-ups, it's all real. And it's all connected to Hawkins' lab." "Monsters?" Shaggy squeaked. "Like, did she say monsters, plural?" "Maybe we should talk somewhere more private," Will suggested quietly, glancing around nervously. The group reconvened at Mike's house, specifically in his basement, apparently the unofficial headquarters for dealing with supernatural crises in Hawkins. The kids had spread out maps, newspaper clippings, and hand-drawn diagrams across a table. "Okay," Velma said, settling in with her notebook. "Start from the beginning." And they did. They told Mystery Inc. about Will's disappearance in 1983, about the Upside Down, a dark parallel dimension that existed beneath Hawkins. They explained how Hawkins' lab had torn open a gate to this other world, about the creatures that came through, and about a girl with psychic powers named 11 who had helped them fight back. Throughout the explanation, Velma's expression shifted from skeptical to intrigued to genuinely concerned. Fred was taking mental notes. Daphne looked worried. And Shaggy and Scooby had somehow found their way into Mike's kitchen, stress-eating. "So you're telling us," Velma said slowly, "that there's a parallel dimension filled with predatory creatures, accessed through a gate created by illegal government experiments, and you kids teenagers have been fighting these things?" "Pretty much," Dustin confirmed. "And nobody believes you?" "The government made sure of that," Lucas said bitterly. "They have people sign NDAs. They discredit witnesses. They cover everything up." Fred shook his head in disbelief. This is beyond anything we've ever dealt with. That's why we need your help," Mike said urgently. "You guys expose frauds and uncover conspiracies." The gate to the Upside Down is closed now, but people are still missing. Something's still going on, and Hawkins' lab is still operating. Before anyone could respond, the basement door opened and a girl with short hair stepped inside. She looked at Mystery Inc. with an intense, evaluating gaze. "This is Elle," Mike said softly. 11. She's the one with powers. Powers? Daphne asked. In response, Elle glanced at the table. A can of Coke slid across its surface without anyone touching it, stopping perfectly in front of Shaggy, who had just returned from the kitchen. Zoinks! Shaggy jumped 3 feet in the air. Velma stared, her scientific worldview cracking. That's impossible. Welcome to Hawkins, Max said with a grim smile. That evening, despite their reservations, Mystery Inc. agreed to investigate the woods where Will Byers had first disappeared. The kids insisted on coming along, and after hearing their stories, the gang didn't feel right refusing. Like, can't we investigate during the daytime? Shaggy pleaded as they trudged through the darkening forest. With lots of sunlight? And maybe a police escort? And a tank. The creatures are more active at night, Dustin explained, adjusting his backpack. If we're going to find evidence of upside-down activity, nighttime is when we'll see it. Velma was scanning the area with an EMF detector she'd brought. The electromagnetic readings are indeed abnormal here. There's definitely some kind of energy signature. That's the Upside Down? Will said quietly. He would know he'd spent a week trapped there. The group moved deeper into the woods, their flashlights cutting through the gathering darkness. Fred led the way with his typical confidence, though even he seemed more nervous than usual. So these Demogorgon things, Fred asked. How many are there? We've killed a few, Lucas said, patting the slingshot at his belt. But there could be more. The Upside Down is like a whole ecosystem. Ecosystem of nightmare monsters, Max added. Just so we're clear. Suddenly, Velma's EMF detector began screaming. The needle maxed out, and sparks flew from the device. She dropped it with a yelp. That's not good, she said. The temperature plummeted. Their breath became visible in the summer air. Frost began creeping across the trees, spreading like a living thing. Guys, Will whispered, his hand going to the back of his neck. It's here. What's here? Daphne asked, though her voice suggested she didn't want to know. Then they heard it. A low, wet growling sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was a sound no animal on Earth should make, something between a growl and a scream, layered with clicking and squelching. Everybody stay calm, Mike said, though his own voice was shaking. The bushes ahead rustled, then parted. What emerged made Shaggy's legs turn to jelly and Scooby's fur stand completely on end. It was tall over 6 feet and stood on 2 legs but hunched forward like a predator. Its body was pale, almost gray, and looked sickeningly organic, like muscle without skin. But the worst part was its head. Or rather, where its head should be. Instead, there was a mass of fleshy petals that suddenly opened like a grotesque flower, revealing a circular mouth filled with rows and rows of needle-sharp teeth. It had no eyes, no nose, nothing recognizable as a face, just that impossible mouth. Demogorgon. The kids screamed in unison. For the first time in their mystery-solving careers, Mystery Inc. understood true terror. This wasn't a person in a costume. This wasn't a projection or a robot. This was a living, breathing monster from another dimension, and it wanted to kill them. Like forget clues, Shaggy shrieked. Run! The group scattered in different directions, the worst possible strategy, but terror overrode training. The Demogorgon's head petals contracted and expanded, as if sniffing the air, then it lunged toward the closest targets, Shaggy and Scooby. Raggy! Scooby wailed as they ran. They crashed through the underbrush, the Demogorgon's footsteps thundering behind them. Shaggy's natural cowardice had given him Olympic-level sprinting abilities, but even that might not be enough. This is not a costume. Shaggy screamed to no one in particular. "This is not a costume." Scooby's legs were spinning like cartoon wheels, but they weren't gaining distance. The creature was faster, stronger, and tireless. Shaggy tripped over a root, and they both went tumbling down a small embankment. They scrambled to their feet at the bottom, backs against a tree, nowhere left to run. The Demogorgon appeared at the top of the slope, silhouetted against the night sky. Its mouth opened wider, revealing a throat that seemed to go down forever. A terrible clicking sound emerged from within it. "Raggy," Scooby whimpered, pressing against his best friend. "Re-love, Ro." "I love you too, buddy," Shaggy said, tears streaming down his face. The monster took a step down the slope. Then Lucas appeared at the top of the ridge. "Hey, Mouthface." He fired his slingshot. The projectile, a ball bearing, struck the Demogorgon directly in its open mouth. It roared, a sound that seemed to tear through reality itself and turn toward this new threat. Lucas ran, leading the creature away. "Guys, a little help here." Dustin emerged from another direction, wielding a baseball bat studded with nails. "From Mirkwood," he screamed, swinging at the creature's leg. The bat connected with a sickening crunch. The Demogorgon staggered, its attention divided between multiple attackers. Then 11 stepped into the clearing. Blood was already dripping from her nose, a sign she was using her powers. She raised one hand, her face contorted with concentration and rage. The Demogorgon lifted off the ground. Mystery Inc., reunited at the bottom of the embankment, watched in absolute shock as the monster thrashed in midair, suspended by nothing but a girl's outstretched hand. "Friends don't lie," Al said through gritted teeth. "And you're not welcome here." With a thrust of her arm, she sent the Demogorgon flying backward. It crashed through 3 trees before hitting a 4th with enough force to crack the trunk. The monster fell to the ground, twitched once, then crawled away into the darkness, but not before they saw it dissolve into what looked like reality itself tearing open, revealing a glimpse of an upside-down world beyond. Then it was gone. The forest was silent except for their ragged breathing. "Did," Velma whispered, her voice barely audible. "Did that girl just ... use telekinesis to throw a monster from another dimension through several trees?" Dustin finished. "Yeah, that's kind of her thing." Fred sat down heavily on a log. "I think we need to reconsider our entire understanding of reality." "Told you," Max said. Back at Mike's basement, the two groups sat in various states of shock and exhaustion. 11 was recovering on the couch, a box of Eggos nearby, apparently her favorite food. The rest of the kids seemed to be handling the night's events with remarkable composure, while Mystery Inc. was decidedly not. Shaggy and Scooby had claimed an entire corner of the basement and were wrapped in blankets, sharing a family-sized bag of chips. "That was real," Velma kept muttering. "That was actually real. No wires, no projections, no costume. A genuine extra-dimensional predator. Jinkies doesn't even begin to cover it," Daphne agreed, still pale. Fred was pacing back and forth. Okay. We need to approach this logically. We've encountered something unprecedented, but that doesn't mean we can't apply our usual investigative methods." "Fred," Velma said gently, "our usual methods involve unmasking people. That thing didn't have a face to unmask. It barely had a head." Mike handed out sodas from a cooler. "Look, we get it. The first time you see the Upside Down or anything from it, it breaks your brain a little. But you guys are smart, experienced investigators. We need that. What you need," Daphne said, "is the National Guard, or the military, or someone with actual weapons." "The military knows," Lucas said bitterly. "They're part of the cover-up. Hawkins' lab is funded by the Department of Energy, but that's just a front. It's all military and CIA." Dustin nodded. "They're the ones who opened the gate in the first place. They've known about the Upside Down since 1983, and they've been trying to weaponize it. Weaponize a dimension full of monsters Fred said flatly. That's insane. That's the government, Max replied. Velma had pulled out a fresh notebook and was frantically taking notes. Despite her shock, her analytical mind was starting to engage with the problem. Tell me everything. Every detail about the Upside Down, the Demogorgon, how the gate works, what Hawkins' lab has been doing. For the next 2 hours, the kids provided a comprehensive briefing. They explained the ecology of the Upside Down, a dark mirror world where everything was dead and decaying. They described the Demogorgon as an apex predator, but not the only creature there. There were also Demodog's smaller but faster versions, and the true horror, the Mind Flayer, a massive entity that controlled the creatures like a hive mind. Will showed them the drawings he'd made while possessed by the Mind Flayer, disturbing sketches of tentacles and shadows that made even Velma uncomfortable. Elle explained, through minimal words and Mike's help, how she had escaped from Hawkins' lab, how she'd been experimented on, how she'd accidentally opened the gate, and how she'd finally closed it temporarily in 1984. Wait, Velma interrupted. Temporarily? You mean the gate could open again? There are still tunnels, Will said quietly. Underground. They connect to the Upside Down. Not as direct as the gate, but they're there. And Hawkins' lab? Fred asked. Still operating, Mike confirmed. They've supposedly shut down the experiments, but we don't believe it. There are still soldiers there, still trucks coming and going at night. Shaggy finally spoke up from his corner. I have a question. Why aren't you kids in hiding? If the government is covering this up, and you know about it, aren't you in danger? The kids exchanged glances. They made our families sign NDAs, Dustin said. Basically threatened us into silence. But we're also the only ones who have successfully fought these things. I think they're afraid that if something goes wrong again, they'll need us. That's leverage, Daphne realized. You're protected because you're useful. For now, Lucas said darkly. Velma closed her notebook. Okay, here's what we know. Hawkins' lab is conducting illegal experiments. They've created or discovered a parallel dimension filled with hostile entities, and they're covering up civilian casualties. That's actionable. We might not be able to fight the monsters, but we can expose the conspiracy. That's what I've been saying, Dustin exclaimed. You guys are famous. People listen to you. If Mystery Inc. reveals what's happening in Hawkins, the government can't ignore it. We need evidence, Fred said. Real, concrete evidence. Documents, photographs, video if possible. Mike leaned forward. We can get into Hawkins' lab. We've done it before. Absolutely not, Daphne said immediately. You kids have already risked your lives too many times. Then, what do you suggest? Max challenged. You saw that Demogorgon. You think you can investigate this without us? We know the tunnels. We know the lab security. And we know how to fight these things if we have to. She's right, Velma admitted reluctantly. We need their expertise. But we also need to be smart about this. No unnecessary risks. Can I vote for a LL unnecessary risks being avoided? Shaggy raised his hand. Including, staying in Hawkins at all? Ray, Scooby agreed. Al, who had been quiet throughout most of the discussion, suddenly spoke. Bad men still there. More experiments. More danger. She looked directly at Velma. You can help. You can tell truth. There was something about the way she said it. This girl who had been tortured and experimented on, who had powers that defied explanation, who had sacrificed so much to protect a town that barely knew she existed. Velma felt something solidify inside her. All right, we'll help. But we do this carefully, methodically, and with a plan. Mystery Inc. style, Fred agreed. Daphne sighed. This is either the bravest or stupidest thing we've ever done. Definitely stupidest, Shaggy muttered. But even he didn't argue further, because for all their fear, Mystery Inc. had never walked away from people who needed help. And these kids, these brave, traumatized, heroic kids needed help. So, Dustin said with a growing smile, when do we start? Velma smiled back grimly. Tomorrow. We start planning our infiltration of Hawkins' lab. The next morning, both groups reconvened at the Wheeler basement, but this time they brought reinforcements. Steve Harrington, Nancy Wheeler, and Jonathan Byers' older teens, who had also fought the Upside Down, joined the planning session. You're really going to break into Hawkins' lab? Steve asked incredulously, his signature baseball bat propped against his shoulder. That place is a fortress. We've been in twice, Dustin reminded him. And you were there the second time. Yeah, and it nearly killed us, Steve shot back. These guys are professional monster hunters, but they hunt fake monsters. No offense. None taken, Fred said. He's absolutely right. We're out of our depth here. But we're also the only ones with a platform to expose this. If we can get solid evidence, the government will discredit us, Nancy interrupted. She had her own notebook out, filled with research. I tried to expose the lab in '84. I had sources, I had evidence, and they shut it all down. Made me look like a crazy conspiracy theorist. But you were one person, Velma countered. Mystery Inc. has national recognition. We've solved hundreds of cases. We have credibility. Had credibility, Jonathan said quietly. The moment you start talking about monsters from other dimensions, that credibility evaporates. Velma considered this. Then, we don't lead with the monsters. We lead with the illegal experiments, the cover-ups, the missing people. The evidence we can prove conventionally. The upside-down stuff can come later, once we've established a basic conspiracy. That's actually smart, Nancy admitted. Daphne spread a hand-drawn map of Hawkins' lab across the table. The kids sketched this out for us. There are 3 main buildings, security checkpoints here, and the elevator down to the sublevels is in the central building. The gate was in the basement, Mike said, pointing. Sublevel 5. That's where most of the experiments happened. Security? Fred asked. Military, Lucas said. Armed guards, cameras, the works. They've tightened security since we shut down the gate, so we need a distraction, Velma mused. Something big enough to draw attention away from our actual infiltration point. Everyone looked at Shaggy and Scooby, who were sharing a submarine sandwich in the corner. Like, why is everyone staring at us? Shaggy asked nervously. You two are excellent at creating chaos, Daphne said sweetly. No, Scooby said, shaking his head vigorously. We'll need better equipment too, Velma continued. Cameras, recording devices, maybe some of El's powers for getting through locked doors. El nodded. Can help. Wait, Steve said. Are we seriously doing this? Breaking into a government facility? You have a better idea? Max challenged. Steve was quiet for a moment, then sighed. I hate that I'm about to say this, but I'm in. Someone's got to keep you kids alive. I'm in too, Nancy said. I want the story. The real story, told the right way. Jonathan nodded. If Nance is in, I'm in. That left only Mystery Inc. to make their final decision. Fred looked at each member of his team. Daphne? Those kids deserve justice. I'm in. Velma? This is the most scientifically significant discovery in human history. Plus, it's the right thing to do. I'm in. Shaggy? Scooby? Both of them looked miserable, but Shaggy stood up, still holding his sandwich. Like, you guys are my family. If you're going into a death trap, I guess we're going with you. Right, Scoob? Rhea, Scooby said reluctantly. Ramily. Then it's settled, Fred announced. We infiltrate Hawkins' lab tomorrow night. The planning continued for hours. They divided into teams. Team Chaos, Shaggy, Scooby, Steve, and Dustin would create a distraction at the front gate. Team Infiltration, Fred, Velma, El, and Mike would enter through a side access tunnel the kids had discovered. Team Overwatch, Daphne, Nancy, Lucas, and Max would monitor security and communications from a safe distance. Will and Jonathan would be the getaway drivers, positioned at 2 different extraction points. Velma created a detailed timeline. They'd go in at 2 a.m. when security shift changes happened. They'd have a 15-minute window to get in, find evidence, and get out before the new shift was fully operational. What kind of distraction are we talking about? Dustin asked excitedly. Knowing you two, Steve said, gesturing at Shaggy and Scooby. Probably something involving running and screaming. Like, that's our specialty, Shaggy confirmed. Actually, Velma said, pushing her glasses up with a calculating look, I have a better idea. We're going to fake a Demogorgon attack. The room went silent. You want to do what? Several people said at once. Think about it, Velma explained. Hawkins' lab knows about the creatures. If they think there's a Demogorgon at their front gate, they'll respond with everything they have. All security will converge on that point, leaving the side entrance vulnerable. But we don't have a Demogorgon, Lucas pointed out. Velma smiled. No, but we have detailed descriptions. And Mystery Inc. has decades of experience creating convincing monster costumes and effects. Like, I really hate this plan, Shaggy said. It's actually brilliant, Nancy admitted. High risk, but brilliant. We'll need to make it convincing, Mike said. They've seen the real thing. They'll know the difference if we half-ass it. We won't, Fred assured him. Give us until tomorrow evening. We'll build something that will fool them in the dark, especially if we add sound effects and the right movements. Elle spoke up. I can help. Make it move ... real. Telekinesis to animate the costume, Velma said, her eyes lighting up. That could work. The plan was coming together. Risky, insane, but possible. As the meeting broke up, Will pulled Velma aside. Can I ask you something? Of course. You've solved all these mysteries, exposed all these frauds. But this is different. This is real danger. Why are you really doing this? Velma was quiet for a moment, then said, Because you kids shouldn't have to carry this alone. Because the truth matters, even when it's terrifying. And because someone needs to hold powerful people accountable when they hurt innocent people. Will smiled slightly. Good answer. Will, Velma said seriously. I'm sorry for what happened to you. What you went through in that place. No one should experience that. But I did, Will said. And it made me stronger. And maybe now, with your help, we can make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. As the groups prepared for the most dangerous mission any of them had ever attempted, there was a sense of purpose in the air. They were afraid, terrified, actually, but they were united. Tomorrow night, they would walk into the lion's den, and hopefully walk back out alive. The mystery machine was parked in an abandoned lot, half a mile from Hawkins' lab, serving as the mobile command center. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Radio check, Daphne said into her walkie-talkie. Team Chaos, do you copy? Like Team Chaos copies, Shaggy's nervous voice crackled back. Though I really hate that name. Team Infiltration copy, Fred confirmed. Overwatch in position, Nancy replied. It was 1:45 a.m. 15 minutes until the shift change, 15 minutes until everything went to hell. In the woods near the front gate, Shaggy, Scooby, Steve, and Dustin were making final preparations to their Demogorgon. Mystery Inc. had worked miracles in 24 hours. The costume was built on a collapsible frame that Shaggy would wear, with the terrifying petal-mouth head controlled by servos and a remote Dustin held. They'd added speakers for the creature's distinctive growl and clicking sounds. Like, remind me why I'm the one wearing this death trap, Shaggy asked. Because you're the only one tall enough and skinny enough to make it look right, Steve said. Plus, you're already an expert at running in weird situations. Ree's rot wrong, Scooby added. Okay, positions everyone? Dustin said, checking his watch. 2 minutes. At the side entrance, Fred, Velma, Mike, and Elle waited in the shadows. This entrance was less fortified, just a service door for maintenance, but it was still locked and monitored. "Al, you sure you can handle the camera and the lock?" Velma whispered. Al nodded, her nose already starting to bleed slightly from the concentration. They watched as the security camera slowly rotated away from the door Al's doing. Then the lock clicked. "We're in," Fred said into his radio. "Wait for the distraction," Daphne's voice came back. "Don't move until we give the signal." Inside the lab's security center, guards were monitoring screens, bored. The night shift at Hawkins' lab was usually uneventful now that the gate was closed. One guard yawned and reached for his coffee. Then alarms started blaring. "Front gate! Front gate! We have a breach." Camera feeds showed a shape moving in the darkness. Then it stepped into the light. The Demogorgon. "Jesus Christ!" one guard shouted. "How is that possible?" "The gate is sealed. All units to the front gate. Code red." "Repeat, code red." Every guard in the facility grabbed weapons and rushed toward the front entrance. Emergency protocols activated. Floodlights blazed to life. "Now!" Daphne shouted into the radio. "Like, that's our cue," Shaggy yelled. Wearing the Demogorgon suit with El's telekinetic assistance making it move unnaturally, he ran toward the gate, arms flailing. The servos made the head pedals open and close. The speakers blared the creature's roar. It was absolutely terrifying. Guards poured out of the building, weapons raised. "Open fire! Zoinks!" Shaggy screamed, abandoning the plan and just running for his life. But that actually made it better. The Demogorgon appeared to be retreating into the woods. "Do not let I-2 escape," a commander shouted. Guards chased after the creature. Steve and Dustin used the chaos to set off firecrackers and smoke bombs they deplanted around the perimeter, adding to the confusion. Meanwhile, team infiltration slipped inside the facility. The hallways were eerily empty, everyone having responded to the alarm. They moved quickly toward the elevator, following the route the kids had memorized. "Sublevel 5, Mike said, pressing the button. "That's where the records are kept." The elevator descended. Velma's heart was pounding. They were actually inside Hawkins' lab. This was real. The elevator opened onto a dimly lit corridor. According to the kids' intel, the main laboratory and records room were at the far end. They encountered their first locked door. Elle handled it easily. The more blood trickled from her nose. "Are you okay?" Velma asked, concerned. "Fine," Elle insisted, though she looked pale. They reached the laboratory, and what they saw made them freeze. Tanks, dozens of them, filled with viscous liquid. And floating inside some of them were ... things. Creatures from the upside down, preserved, dead. But in one tank, something moved. "Oh my God," Fred whispered. It was a baby demodog, as the kids called it. Very much alive, suspended in the fluid, cables attached to its body. "They're still experimenting," Velma said, her voice shaking with rage. "After everything that's happened, they're still doing this." "Get pictures," Mike urged. "Document everything." Velma pulled out her camera and started shooting. Fred found filing cabinets and began photographing documents, experiment logs, casualty reports, memos discussing containment failures and cover-up strategies. "Velma, you need to see this," Fred called out, holding up a document. "They're planning to reopen the gate. Controlled conditions, they say. They want to study the dimension itself." "These people are insane," Velma muttered, photographing the document. Suddenly, Elle stiffened. "Someone coming. We need to go." "Now," Mike said. They grabbed what they could and rushed back toward the elevator. Behind them, they heard doors opening, voices shouting. "They know we're here," Fred said. They reached the elevator just as guards rounded the corner. "Stop! Hands up!" Elle turned, raised her hand, and every guard went flying backward, slamming into walls. The effort made her collapse, and Mike caught her. "Sorry," she mumbled. "Don't be sorry. That was awesome," Mike said. helping her into the elevator. The doors closed just as more guards arrived. They rode up in tense silence, knowing security would be waiting at the top. "Team Chaos, we need an exit route," Fred radioed. "Like, we're a little busy." Shaggy's voice came back, punctuated by gunfire sounds. "These guys really don't like Demogorgons." "Overwatch status?" Velma asked. "North corridor is clear," Nancy reported. "Get out the way you came in. We'll cover you." They exited the elevator on the ground floor and ran. Behind them, alarms blared and guards shouted. They burst out the side entrance into the night. Lucas and Max were waiting in the trees with slingshots. They fired at pursuing guards not to hurt, just to slow them down and create confusion. "Where's Team Chaos?" Daphne asked urgently over the radio. "Running," came Shaggy's reply. They could see him now, still in the Demogorgon suit, with Scooby, Steve, and Dustin sprinting alongside him. Guards were in pursuit, but the darkness and smoke were working in their favor. "Everyone to the extraction point," Nancy ordered. The groups converged at Jonathan's car and Will's van, parked on an old access road. They piled in, Elle barely conscious from exertion, everyone else running on pure adrenaline. "Go, go, go!" Steve shouted. The vehicles peeled out just as military trucks arrived. They raced through Hawkins' back roads, taking turns so fast the cars nearly tipped. But they knew these roads better than the soldiers did. After 20 minutes of evasive driving, they finally stopped at a prearranged safe house Hopper's old cabin, deep in the woods. They stumbled inside, exhausted and terrified but alive. And more importantly, they had the evidence. "We did it," Velma said, clutching the camera and documents. "We actually did it." "That was insane," Steve said, collapsing on the couch. "That was the most insane thing we've ever done, and we've done a lot of insane things." Shaggy was trying to get out of the Demogorgon costume with limited success. "Like, can someone help me? I'm stuck being a monster." As the adrenaline wore off, reality set in. They'd broken into a government facility. They'd stolen classified documents. They were now fugitives, but they also had the truth. And tomorrow, they'd figure out how to share it with the world. For tonight, they were just grateful to be alive. The next morning, the cabin was a hive of activity. Nancy had contacts at multiple newspapers and news stations, ones that hadn't been compromised by government pressure. Velma was organizing the evidence into a coherent narrative. Fred was drafting a statement for Mystery Inc. to release. "We need to be strategic about this," Nancy said, spreading out a list of media contacts. "Release it everywhere at once." Too many sources for them to shut down. The photos of the creatures, the experiment logs, the cover-up memos. Velma listed. "This is damning evidence. But we need to frame it correctly." Daphne nodded. "We lead with the illegal experiments on human subjects, specifically Elle and the other children. That's what will get public outrage. The monsters come second." "What about us?" Mike asked. "Our family signed NDAs. If this goes public, we could be in legal trouble." "Let them try," Steve said firmly. "You were kids, traumatized kids. No NDA in the world is going to hold up against that sympathy." Jonathan was already editing video footage. He'd managed to capture some of the chaos from outside the lab. "This is good. Shows military response, weapons, everything." There was a knock at the door that made everyone freeze. "Police?" Lucas whispered. Fred cautiously approached and looked through the window. His jaw dropped. "It's Sheriff Hopper?" "Wait, are you a Tay?" Mike rushed to the door. Standing outside was Jim Hopper, Hawkins' police chief, and a man who knew all about the Upside Down. He looked tired and angry. "Are you kids trying to get yourselves killed?" he asked, stepping inside. "Hopper, we thought you were..." Elle started. "Dead? Trapped in Russia? Long story. I got back 2 weeks ago." He looked at the spread of evidence on the table and whistled. "You actually broke into Hawkins' lab." "They're still experimenting," Mike said defensively. They're planning to reopen the gate. Hopper held up his hands. I know. I've been trying to build a case against them through official channels, but the corruption goes too high. I had no idea you kids were planning this insane stunt. It wasn't just us, Will said. Mystery Inc. helped. Hopper looked at the 5 members of Mystery Inc., taking in their disheveled appearance and determined expressions. The people with the dog and the van. I've heard of you. You usually deal with real estate developers in monster costumes, not government conspiracies. We adapt, Velma said simply. Hopper sat down heavily. Look, what you did last night was illegal, dangerous, and incredibly stupid. He paused. It was also exactly what we needed. With this evidence, I can force a federal investigation. The problem is, you're all now targets. We're releasing it publicly, Nancy said. All of it. Today. That'll protect you in some ways, Hopper admitted. Hard to quietly disappear people once their story is public. But it'll also make you permanent enemies of some very powerful people. We've considered that, Fred said. But the truth matters more. Hopper studied them for a long moment, then nodded. All right, then let's do this right. I'll coordinate with the FBI field office in Indianapolis. There are still some agents who aren't compromised. We'll time your media release with official raids on Hawkins' lab. You can do that? Daphne asked. Not officially, but I know people who owe me favors. Big favors. He looked at Elle. You okay, kid? She nodded. Tired, but okay. What you did last night, all of you, Hopper said, addressing the whole group. It took guts. Stupid, reckless guts, but guts nonetheless. They spent the next few hours coordinating. Nancy reached out to her media contacts. Hopper made encrypted calls to federal agents he trusted. Velma and Fred refined their statement. Jonathan and Daphne prepared the visual evidence. At exactly 3 p.m., it all went live simultaneously. The Chicago Tribune published Nancy's article. Government laboratory conducts illegal experiments on children. Covers up multiple deaths, Mystery Inc. Released a video statement with evidence on national television. Photos and documents flooded social media. The FBI raided Hawkins' lab. The story exploded. Within hours, it was the top story on every news channel. The images of the preserved creatures, the experiment logs, Al's testimony about being tortured as a child. It was too big to ignore or suppress. At the cabin, they watched the news coverage in stunned silence. We did it, Mike whispered. We actually did it. On the screen, Dr. Brenner, the head of Hawkins' lab, was being led away in handcuffs. Politicians were scrambling to distance themselves. Calls for investigations echoed through Congress. Shaggy and Scooby were sharing a celebratory pizza that Hopper had brought. Like, does this mean we can go home now? Shaggy asked hopefully. Soon, Fred assured him. We'll need to give official statements, probably testify eventually. But the hard part is over. Is it though? Max asked quietly. The gate is still there, sealed, but there. The upside down still exists. We exposed the conspiracy, but the actual threat isn't gone. Velma nodded soberly. You're right. But at least now people know. Resources can be properly allocated. Scientists can study the phenomenon openly. And most importantly, she looked at Elle and the kids. You don't have to carry this secret alone anymore. Will smiled. That's worth everything. A week later, Mystery Inc. was preparing to leave Hawkins. Their van was packed, statements had been given, and the media frenzy was finally starting to die down. The kids gathered to say goodbye. So, this was definitely our weirdest case ever, Shaggy said. Weirdest ever, Scooby agreed. Thank you, Mike said earnestly. All of you. We couldn't have done this without you. You kids saved the world multiple times before we ever showed up, Daphne said warmly. We just helped get the credit where it's due. Velma handed Dustin a notebook. I wrote down everything I could theorize about the Upside Down based on what we learned. I know there are scientists coming to study it now, but I thought you might want this. Are you kidding? This is awesome. Dustin flipped through the pages excitedly. Fred shook hands with each of the kids. You ever need investigators again, you know how to reach us. Though hopefully your monster fighting days are over. Yeah, right, Lucas laughed. This is Hawkins. Elle approached Scooby and gave him a gentle hug. Good dog, brave dog. Rank row, Scooby said, blushing. As Mystery Inc. climbed into their van, Nancy approached Velma one last time. Hey, I'm writing a book about all of this. Would you be willing to contribute? Your perspective on investigating the impossible? Velma smiled. I'd be honored. Steve knocked on the van window as they started the engine. Hey, Mystery Inc., you guys are all right. For a bunch of people who usually chase fake ghosts, you're not so bad yourself, Fred grinned. For a guy who fights real monsters with a baseball bat. As the Mystery Machine pulled away, the kids waved from the street. They'd formed an unlikely alliance, bridged two different kinds of heroism, and exposed a conspiracy that had haunted Hawkins for years. So, Daphne asked as they drove toward the town limits, where to next? Somewhere quiet, Shaggy pleaded. Like somewhere with no monsters, no dimensions, and no government conspiracies. Velma pulled out a folder. Actually, I have reports of strange occurrences at a summer camp in Michigan. Probably just someone in a mask, though. Probably? Shaggy and Scooby chorused. Fred laughed. Well, Gant, it looks like we've got another mystery on our hands. Scooby-Dooby-Doo. Scooby howled from the back. As Hawkins disappeared in the rearview mirror, something strange happened. Just for a moment, the sky seemed to flicker. Reality wavered. Then it was gone. In the van, no one noticed. But in Hawkins, the kids looked up at the sky with concern. Did you see that? Will asked. Mike nodded grimly. Yeah, I saw it. The Upside Down wasn't finished with Hawkins yet. But now, at least, they weren't facing it alone. They had allies, they had resources, and they had hope. And sometimes, that made all the difference.